All right, have you ever hurt yourself or been hurt where you had maybe a bruise or you had to wear a big bandage or a sling or a cast, and you walk into an area, maybe they've not seen it, and what's the first question that people ask you? Like, what did you do? Like, what happened? What's going on? They want to know the story, right, behind the sling or the cast or the bandage or whatever. And it's like the thing. You could walk in and have the greatest smile on your face, and the first thing they're going to notice about you is like, dude, what is that? What happened to you? Why in the world, did you do that? What happened? So you have to tell the story, and you tell them everything. And I think it's funny, I've done a guy's small group, I don't know, for probably 10 years now. And it's amazing if any guy in the group just references a scar that he has, you can be guaranteed the next 25 minutes, it's guys like going, let me show you this scar, and every scar has a story. And here's what's funny. If I were to ask, and guys, you can respond if you want to, but most guys, if I said, hey, do you have a favorite scar? I would say probably 60 to 70% were like, oh yeah, this is my favorite scar, and they tell you the story. So I just figured I would start this morning because my body is covered in scars. Like literally, I've got scars everywhere. Some things that just happened. Some I was a kid. I did stupid things. But my favorite scar, and I'll tell you the story. My favorite scar happened when I was 5 years old. I was 5 years old. For those of you that are under the age of 30, I'm going to share just a real quick note for you. All soda pop used to come in glass bottles all the time. I know. We loved the environment more. But literally, they would come in these soda bottles. And what would happen, unfortunately, is that, you recycle them, they'd get refilled, and eventually what would happen is the bottom of these Coke bottles would become fragile. And they would just kind of snap off. They just pop right off the bottom. Now, the difficulty with that is if you were walking somewhere, you could lose where that particular bottom went to, and you had no idea. So I'm 5 years old. We're living in a little place called Penn Yan, New York, and my dad is mowing. No kidding, I am 74 feet. We went back and measured it. My dad did. I'm 74 feet away from him in the sandbox. Now, for those of you, again, that are younger, lawnmowers used to be dangerous pieces of equipment that were cast metal, massive things that when you turned on, it sounded like a jet engine was starting, like it was just always that big. And so he's mowing, and he hits something unknowingly, has no idea. I am, again, 74 feet away in the sandbox, and that thing comes flying across the yard and hits me right here on the back of the very last tendon on the front side, or the side of my leg. And it digs in. It's the bottom of a Coke bottle. It digs into my leg, and it crosses all the way across my knee and then comes out the other side. It literally laid my entire knee wide open. And I'm sitting there, and I felt something. I remember this vividly, like literally. And I felt something, but it wasn't really painful. And then I felt like there was water on my leg. It was not water. My entire bottom half of my leg was covered in blood. And my sisters are going, ah! My dad can't hear because he's pushing the lawnmower. Eventually, he hears the entire underneath of the sandbox underneath me is all covered. It was fantastic. It was wonderful. I know guys are like, cool. The women are like, oh no. So my dad comes and gets me, but my mom is gone with the only car that they had. And so he calls somebody. It's called a phone that they had in the house. It was hooked to a line. And the guy comes with his brand new Cadillac with white leather interior. Yeah, baby. And so I'm wrapped in all these towels, and I had over 100 stitches across my knee. Now, granted, I was much smaller, but still the scar goes from here to here on my leg, and that is my favorite scar because that is the greatest story that you can tell. What happened to you? Well, my dad cut my knee all the way open. It was fantastic. So literally every scar, I've got a scar here on my hand, I've got a scar here where I opened my thumb up with a table saw, I've got a scar here where I cut like the literally flayed my entire finger open with a Bowie knife cutting down corn stalks because that's what you do with a Bowie knife. And so we all have these scar stories, right? We all have these things that are a part of who we are, and every single one of them has a story attached to it. That's really the big idea for today. Every scar has a story. Every scar has a story. If you point to a scar on somebody, and here's the thing, guys, we love scars. Ladies, you don't like scars so much, but we love scars. For some reason, scars because we know intuitively, guys, right, that every scar's got a story like, okay, how did that happen? They're like, oh, well. And they tell the story. And it's great. We've been going to this series, 4 Truths to Win at Life. We've been taking kind of old coach phrases and applying them to life. And we began week 1 on Easter with you don't win without sacrifice. And then last week we talked about the fact that you can't win with a bad attitude. And attitude ruins everything. And negativity can just destroy you from the inside out. And then today we're talking about the fact that if you don't have the grass stains, if you've not gotten into it, there's no glory. If you don't have the bruises, there's not a story. And then we're going to end next week with it ain't over till it's over. But today, we're going to start in the book of John. John, the writer of this particular passage of Scripture, was Jesus' best friend. And so he writes often with a much more familial, relational sense as he writes the book of John. That's why when people say, I want to know more about Jesus, the thing I say is, listen, start with the book of John, because that's literally Jesus' best friend that just shares with you, hey, this is who he was, this is what he was like, this is what he did. And so in the book of John, he shares this interesting story where the disciples, minus one disciple, his name was Thomas, were in the upper room where they had the Last Supper with Jesus Christ, and they're all kind of cowering, and the door was locked, and the door was closed, and all of a sudden Jesus appeared to them. He walked through the wall. How cool is that? Although, I'm not going to lie, I'd be a little terrified at that point in time. And he shows up, and he says, hey, it's me, and he sits with them, and he eats with them, and he tells them, and then he disappears. And then later, Thomas comes back from whatever errand he was running. Maybe they were out of pita bread or something, and I was going to get some, and he comes back, and they're like, dude, Jesus was here. And he's like, oh, how fermented is that wine, guys? And he literally makes this statement. He says, unless I see it, unless I touch it, unless I put my finger in the holes in his hands, I won't believe. We'll pick it up here in verse 24. One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. And they told him, we have seen the Lord. But he replied, I won't believe unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, and I put my fingers in them, and I place my hand into the wound in his side. What Thomas is saying is, you know what, guys? I don't believe it. And I won't believe it until I see the scars. Because I know the scars. I saw. I watched it happen. And I will not believe it until I see the scars. So we fast forward. The Bible tells us about 8 days, 7 to 8 days, about a week. And the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them, and the doors were locked. But suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. He's like, peace be with you. Don't freak out. It's okay. And then he said to Thomas, can you imagine how Thomas felt at this point in time? Because listen, I know he went a little far by hey, I got to put my finger in there, and but literally, Jesus shows up, and Thomas is like, wow, he's really alive. And Jesus goes, oh, no. We all remember what you said, Thomas. You said unless you put your fingers in it, unless you touched it, you wouldn't believe. So let's make it happen. And he looks at Thomas, and he says, put your finger here, and look at my hands, and put your hand in the wound in my side. And then he says this. He says, don't be what? Don't be faithless any longer. Don't be faithless any longer, but believe. He's talking about a choice here, and he says, listen, I know that you say you need to see my scars. You need to see these things. You need to touch it to be able to believe. But Thomas, I want you to realize and I want you to recognize that these scars are here intentionally so that you will have faith. And then he goes on and Thomas says, my Lord and my God. In other words, it's you. I believe it. I believe it, Thomas exclaims. And then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. You see, that's a powerful truth. That's who we are. We're the people that Jesus is talking about at the end because we've not seen the physical scars of Jesus Christ. We've heard the story. We, in our mind's eye and our imagination, our ability to read Scripture and hear it and kind of paint that picture mentally, we've seen it that way, but we weren't there physically to be able to see or touch the scars or hear the voice of Jesus Christ. And so we are that part. He says, you are blessed. Those that haven't seen it or touched it or visualized it, but they just simply believe, those people are even more blessed than you because, Thomas, you believed because you saw. Jesus' scar story is without a doubt the most epic of all scar stories. I mean, it doesn't matter how cool your scar story is, it doesn't even stand next to Jesus' scar story. His scars tell such a compelling and epic story that they can literally turn someone from faithless to faithful with just hearing about the story. His scars tell us a story of love. He loved us so much that he was willing to die for us. His scars tell us a story of sacrifice, that he willingly gave up his life so that we could live. His scars tell a story of healing. The Bible says in the book of Isaiah, by his scars, by his wounds, we are healed. His scars tell a story of victory because we are no longer captive by sin and death, but rather we are victorious. Thomas struggled to believe that Jesus was alive, but he conquered death and he conquered sin. And when he saw the scars, he knew the truth. So, what type of story do your scars tell? I'm not talking about the physical ones. I'm talking about the one that no one sees. The emotional scars. The spiritual scars, the relational scars, the personal scars that you self-inflicted. Those scars of the struggle in your life that have been leading up to this point in time, what story do they tell? You know, our big idea today is every scar has a story, and I guarantee you if you begin to start thinking about those scars that are internal, that are invisible, but you feel them just the same, and sometimes maybe you even feel them stronger than you do the physical scars that you have, and those scars, you know that they have a story. The problem is you don't like the story that they tell because maybe you're embarrassed by it, or you're hurt by it, or it's just too painful to tell that story. And the reason is because the world has tried very, very hard to convince us that our scars define who we are. That they literally define who we are. You can't change because of this scar. You'll never be this because of this scar. The scars kind of put you in this box where you can't move beyond it. But the Bible tells us that our scars can be something that actually sets us free. Every scar has a story. And so today what I want to do is I want to help you define or refine your scar stories. Again, the world would say they define you. But I would completely disagree. I believe that through Jesus Christ, every embarrassing, shameful, and painful scar can be redeemed to tell a story both for you to remember and to give hope for others who may be struggling with the same things in their past. There are at least 3 stories. There's probably more. But there are at least 3 stories that every scar can tell. The first 2 are specifically for you. There's just for your internal story, for you to be able to think through the process through. The last one is for others. So let's get into it this morning. The first story that your scar can tell you is that scars encourage you with how far you've come. Your scars encourage you with how far you've come. You think back to some of the dumb scars that you have in life. Some of them physical, some of them internal, some of them invisible, that where you've never told anybody about. And you think back to those and you look back at the events that created those scars and you think to yourself how stupid that was. The fact that you recognize how stupid that was shows that you've moved forward. The fact that you can look back and go, I can't believe I did that, shows that you are not who you were at that point in time. You've become someone and something different. We're going to read from the book of Lamentations, and I got to tell you, Lamentations is a painful book to read. Literally, it's called Lamentations. If you're not familiar with the old school word lament, it means like to moan, to be full of sorrow. And so the entire book of Lamentations is written by a guy named Jeremiah, whose nickname was the Weeping Prophet. That just gets you up in the morning, doesn't it? And so his entire book and the book of Lamentations is him writing all these things and his sorrow and his depression over what he's seen. Because God called him, there's a lot of interesting tasks that God has called people to, but Jeremiah, I got to say, may have had a really sucky task. He was the prophet, and here's was his job, okay? Jeremiah, and this is literally, it's recorded for us in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, God comes to Jeremiah and says, listen, you're going to be my prophet. And Jeremiah's like, oh, great. And he goes, no, not so great, because no one's ever going to listen to you. Awesome. Fantastic. But listen, Jeremiah, I want you to preach nonstop every single day. Don't back off. I want you to communicate to the people of Jerusalem that if they do not turn back to God, this army is going to come in, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed, the temple's going to be destroyed, all of this horrible stuff is going to happen. And you preach, and Jeremiah, I can just imagine, goes, okay, so God, if I preach good enough, are they going to respond? No, they will absolutely ignore you. In fact, they will hate you. They will beat you, they will cast you out of the city, and they will call you a liar. And then, when the army comes, because you have so discouraged the people by the truth that you've preached, the army of the opposing people are going to love you, and they're going to say, you're so great because you depressed everyone in Jerusalem, and we just came in and took over. What a great challenge and purpose for someone's life, right? No wonder he wrote the book of Lamentations. And literally, his entire life is this. And part of the book of Lamentations, Lamentations chapter 3, I want you to just hear just the depth of the pain of the scars that are in his life. He says, the thought of my suffering and my homelessness is bitter beyond words. Have you ever had a pain so deep you're like, I cannot even describe it to you, how it feels. And that's what Jeremiah is saying. He's like, the hurt that I have is so pervasive and deep, it is beyond my capacity to communicate in words how I feel. Now, I want you to notice, he doesn't say, but feelings are just feelings, so I got over it. He's like, it hurts. And then he goes on and he says this, I will what? I will never forget. I'm never going to forget it. You know, sometimes, you ever had somebody like a pain in your past, and you have somebody that's a friend who thinks that they're this great counselor, and they say something like this, you just need to get over it. Don't you just want to tell them, well, I probably can't communicate the words that you want to say to them? Because you're like, you just don't get it, man. He said, I'm never going to forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. Is this words of a guy who's denying the pain in his life? No, he's making it very clear because I want to tell you something. I have hurting so much. I have hurt so badly, I cannot even put it into words. The grief and the loss that I feel is beyond the weight of my burden to be able to carry it on my own. And then, now listen, and then he goes, yet, or although, or however, or but, or whatever you want to put in there. He goes, still, I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh every morning. Now, if you've ever been in church at any point in time in your life, or you've listened to K-Love on the radio, or you've walked into a Christian trinket store, then you will probably have heard, you're like, oh, that sounds familiar, I've heard that before, because literally everybody loves that verse. Oh, the loving kindness of the Lord endures forever, and his mercy is every morning. And you never knew the context where Jeremiah goes, this is awful. I hate this. This is so painful. This is so difficult. I don't know that I will ever forget this. But God is still faithful. But God hasn't forgotten me. But he will renew his mercies for me every single morning. We tend to look at our scars and think just how stupid we were. We look at our scars and we're like, I just can't believe that I was that way, or I did that, or I was a part of that, or that somebody hurt me in that way. And we want to look at those, and we want to focus on those, and we want to almost capture ourselves in that moment. But what I want you to do today is, if you've got a scar like that in your past that you just feel like you can't get over, I want you to stop thinking about the dumb things or the pain or the hurt of that moment, and instead look back. In fact, honestly, don't look back, peek back, because if you look backwards and walk forwards, danger's coming. You tend to hit stuff. But if you peek back and you go, you know what? I realize now just how far I've come, because that scar's in my past. It's not in my present. It's not in my future. And I'm going to keep moving forward. Your scars are an encouragement to keep you focused on your future, not fixed in your past. Take that quick peek back and realize that you're probably further ahead in your life and further past it than you ever realized you would be. Because if we keep focusing on what was, it's a fool's game. And you will begin to allow yourself to be defined by your past scars instead of released to the future that God has for you. So, our scars tell a story that is encouraging and reminds us of how far we've come. Number two, the second story your scars can tell you. Your scars remind you that you've been healed. The scars remind you that you've been healed. Do you know that a scar cannot happen unless the healing has begun? I'm no doctor. And I'm not really brilliant in that way. But I know that if a scar is there, that means the wound is healed. Now, you pick at it or you pull a scab back or something, you can start the process all over again. But like the scar, you're like, yeah, I see, it's healed. Now, do sometimes you feel it? Yeah. You ever bump it the right way? You have a scar that if you bump just the right way, it's like, oh, and you feel it still, right? But the wound is gone. Do you know why it's gone if you know Jesus Christ? It's this verse here. It's actually in the book of Psalms, and it says, let's bring that up. Psalm 147:3, he heals the brokenhearted, and he bandages their wounds. You know that one of the things that God loves to do is heal the brokenness and heal the wounds that we have within us. God is an expert. In fact, he calls himself the physician, the great physician. Scars arrive after the wounds have been healed. Jesus didn't die so that you and I could continue walking around wounded. You know what the most dangerous animal in the world is? It's a wounded animal. It's an animal that still is feeling the pain. It's an animal that's not thinking right because all it can imagine is the pain. It doesn't know if you hurt him or if something else hurt him, but it's going to lash out at anyone and everyone around them. And do you know that is exactly what a wounded person does? If you are living in your wounds instead of experiencing the healing that God has for you, you are going to be just like a wounded animal and lash out at other people because hurt people hurt people. That's just the way that it is. And Jesus Christ didn't die. He didn't bear his wounds so that we could continue walking around wounded. Scars? Yeah. Scars remind us of what was. Scars encourage us of how far we've come. But the truth is that our scars are the healing process of wounds that we've experienced. There's a great name that God gives himself. It's Jehovah Rapha. Jehovah Rapha. And the name is simply this: the God who heals. The God who heals. That's a name that God has given himself. He says, listen, you want to know part of my name? Part of my name is I am the God who heals. So today maybe you're carrying wounds that haven't turned into scars, but the reason that they're not scars anymore is because you won't let them heal. And so what I want to encourage you to do today, and you can take it, write it down however you want to, but I want to encourage you to begin to call on the name of Jehovah Rapha, because he is the God who heals. And it may not take place overnight. Don't assume. You go, I'm going to pray tonight. God, Jehovah Rapha, I pray that I heal. And you wake up in the morning and I'm going to feel wonderful. No. It's a process. Wounds don't heal overnight, do they? But the thing is that Jesus Christ died so that he could heal your wounds. Isaiah says that. It says, listen, by his stripes, by his scars, that we are healed. And so the truth is that if you have scars, that means you've gone through the healing process. And so the scars tell you the story that you are healed. And today, if you are struggling with a scar, you're struggling with a wound that hasn't healed, or maybe the reason it hasn't healed is because you haven't allowed it to heal, because you kind of like that feeling of being the wounded person or the wounded victim. Today is the day to set that aside and say, no longer, I serve a God who is the God who heals. And I'm ready for my scar. Because chicks dig scars. I'm ready for the healing and to let that scar tell the story that you've been healed. And scars encourage us of how far we've come. And here's our last one. Scars show others there's still hope. Our scars show others there's still hope. Part of the reason you have scars is because God allowed those scars in your life so that when you bump into people that have the same scars, you can give them hope. Listen to this. It's found in the book of 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul writing. He, God, comforts us in all our troubles. Now, I want you to focus on something very, very important here, because we read that and we go, oh, that feels good, right? He comforts us in our troubles. But then Paul says, let me give you the reason that he does that. He comforts us in our troubles so that we can what? Comfort others. You know that when God does something in us, it's not ever just for us? We are to be a conduit through in which God works in other people's lives. So even when God gives you comfort in your sorrow and in your pain, when he heals your wounds, it's not just for you. It's also so that when you bump up against someone else who needs the comfort that he gave you, it can flow through you to give them comfort as well. Your most painful moment has the potential to become your most powerful ministry. Now, there have been a myriad of times where I've been sitting with a guy or a couple, and they're sharing with me just the heartbreak that's gone on with them, the loss that they've experienced. And I sit there kind of dumbfounded because I'm like, I have no, and literally I say this all the time, I'm like, I have no idea what you're going through. You ever had somebody, you go through something, and they're well-meaning, right? They're well-meaning. Can I just say this? Okay, side note, sorry, I get distracted sometimes, but just a side note. If somebody in your life is hurting, unless you literally have gone through what they've gone through, don't say, I know what you're feeling. Because you have just given them another thing to try to not do, and that is to slap you. Because you don't know what they're going through. But I can tell you this, I don't know how many times I've sat with a couple, or I've sat with a guy, and we're talking through things, and I'm sharing the Word of God, and I'm praying for them, and I'm trying to give comfort, and then they bump into somebody else who's had the same kind of loss, the same kind of pain, the same kind of hurt, but their scars are not, their wounds are now scars, they've healed, and they can look back and they can go, man, I know how far I am, and they can literally put their arm around that guy or that couple, and they go, I remember what that felt like. And you go, what do you mean? You go, I went through the same thing. You know, there is something unbelievably powerful in shared suffering. It makes you feel like you're not alone. You ever had something happen to you and you felt so alone? Because you thought to yourself, no one else can understand what I'm going through. And then God drops someone in your life that can go, not only do I understand, I've got the scar. And I made it through. And I know how you're feeling right now. In fact, when I was in your shoes, the hurt and the pain was so much that I didn't think I could actually get out of bed. I was so overwhelmed with guilt or with fear or with pain or with struggling or regret that I didn't think that I could make it. And you know what? The person says, what did you do? You say, you know what? I got out of bed. I took a shower. I started taking one step in front of the other because healing is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But man, we'll walk through this with you because we've been there. There's something incredibly powerful when you realize that you are not alone. It's not fake sympathy or a card or someone who's like, yeah. It's literally someone that goes, I get it. And they give you hope because they can show you the scars. And if they can make it through, so can I. And so God gives you that story to be able to do it. And now some of you maybe go, yeah, but you don't understand. There's nobody in the world that has gone through what I have gone through. And I'm not even going to dismiss it and say that's crazy because it may be true. But do you know that if no one else in the entire world has gone through what you've gone through, Jesus has? In fact, in the book of Hebrews chapter 4, it says that we do not have a high priest, we don't have a counselor who doesn't understand what we've gone through. In the reality, he's gone through every struggle, every temptation, every betrayal, every pain, every heartache, every hurt that we have gone through. And he did so without sinning, without rejecting, doing and staying on mission, and he accomplished it. And because he knows he can be there for us. Even if you feel all alone in your wounds that haven't yet healed, you can run to the cross of Jesus Christ. And in Isaiah 49:16, I love this. It's Jesus Christ talking, pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, and he speaks to the prophet Isaiah, and he says this, see, I have your name engraved on the palms of my hands. What are in the palms of Jesus' hand? It's the holes of the nails of the cross. And Jesus says, I want you to see this. I've been there. I've got the scars to prove that I understand what you're going through. And the world loves to try to trick us into believing that our scars define us. But Jesus says, no. Your scars don't define you. My scars define you. And you are redeemed. You are released. You are renewed. And so if you look at your scars through the scars of Jesus Christ, you can look back and say, my scars show that I'm moving forward. I'm not standing still anymore. My scars declare that I've been healed. My scars allow me to give hope to others. Louis Giglio makes this quote in one of his books. He says, "We let the enemy define us by our scars when Jesus' desire is to define us by his." It's not something that we even really understand until we get into it. We go, okay, I don't want to live in my past anymore, the scars or the pain or the hurt. I rather want to see everything through the story that the scars of Jesus tells. Your scars is telling a story of redemption and salvation and renewing you into his image every single day. So listen to them through the filter of the scars of Jesus Christ. And look back. Don't just peek back. Don't even look back. Just peek back and see how far you've come. And remember that it might have hurt, and it may still hurt, but you've got a God who heals. And that story, that scar, that painful thing may be able to give you the opportunity to offer the same comfort and the same hope to someone else. Father, we thank you. We thank you for our scars. And God, that may be the first time any one of us have ever been able to say that. That we're thankful for those scars because those scars do tell a story. Every scar, every experience, every painful moment in our lives tell a story. And God, I pray that we realize that even though maybe we looked at that story and we're ashamed by it, we're pained by it, we're fearful of it, God, I pray that we'd see it through the scars of Jesus Christ who redeemed us and reconciled us and restored us and desires to renew us. And God, that story tells us we're no longer that person anymore. We're not there anymore. We've moved past that. We've moved forward. And although we're not who we're going to be, we're not who we were anymore. But God, for those of us who are still going through the healing process, God, I just pray they would just cry out to Jehovah Rapha and they would just say, God, you say you're the God who heals. I need some healing. For those of us who've gone through the healing process, that we no longer look at our scars as something that we disdain or that we try to avoid, but rather we would look at those scars and go, yeah, I have that scar because I'm healed by the God who heals. That God, you'd give us a supernatural awareness to those around us who've got some similar scars. And God, we don't get together and commiserate and talk about how horrible life is and how tough this is, but rather we get together and we go, you know what, I've been there, but you don't have to stay there. Look at what God did for me, and he can do the same thing for you. Because God's healing you. He's creating a scar so that you can comfort others that there's still hope. And God, I thank you for that. I pray this in the powerful, in the precious name, and through the scars of Jesus Christ. Amen.